Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome to our 22nd online weekly cultural heritage of Kashmir series. Today's lecture is by Srimati Rohini Vaishnavi. We will begin our program with a prayer song by Gopika Devarajan. Gopika has been learning music from the age of 6 and now under Parur Dr. Harini Srivatsa. Dr. Harini, as we all know, has appeared many times in our program. Gopika is an alumnus of Vidya Mandir Senior Secondary School, Mylapore, Chennai. She is pursuing her BCom Honors at MOP Vaishnava College for Women, Chennai. Yes, Gopika?
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. So today I will be singing a few shlokas from Bhavani Ashtakam. न तातो न माता न पुत्रो न दाता न पुत्रो न पुत्री न भृत्यो न भर्ता न तातो न माता न बन्धु न दाता न पुत्रो न पुत्री न भृत्यो न भर्ता न जाया न विद्या न वृत्तिं ममैव गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानी न जाया न विद्या न वृत्तिं ममैव गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानी भवाब्धाव पारे महादुःखभीरु पपात प्रकामी प्रलोभी प्रमत्तः भवाब्धाव पारे महादुःखभीरु पपात प्रकामी प्रलोभी प्रमत्तः कुसंसारपाश प्रबद्धः सदाहं कुसंसारपाश प्रबद्धः सदाहं गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानी गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानी गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानी. Thank you.
We thank Gopika once again and would like her to come back for our future programs.
Sure, it's a pleasure actually. Thank you.
Our speaker today is Srimati Rohini Vaishnavi. Rohini ji is the founder of RV Learning Foundation, an organization which works for education of underprivileged, creation of entrepreneurial opportunities for women, creating inclusive workplaces, and for building employability skills in the youth. Rohini is an MBA from Lyric Business School, Belgium. To summarize her skills, her expertise lies in consultative selling, selling of services to B2B markets, conducting market research to acquire market intelligence, personal selling, and managing sales teams in India and overseas. Being a mother and a professional herself, Rohini has witnessed the struggle which women go through in their lives while managing their careers and family, which led her to launch RV Learning Foundation. Our organization also offers solutions to the corporate clients so as to make their workplaces inclusive for diverse workforce. She has edited the book Chronicles of Kashmir, written by Sri Balakrishnan Sannyasi. She will talk about that at the end. As always, we thank Sri Kanchimat for our ongoing initiative and offer our Namaskaram to His Holiness Sri Shankara Vijayendra Saraswati Swamigal. With his blessings, we continue with our Kashmir Cultural Heritage Awareness Series. Sri Kanchi Mat has always been in the forefront, modestly working with the sole aim of national integration, spiritual enlightenment, and spreading the uniqueness as Kashmir is our cultural heritage. We now request Rohini Vaishnavi for her presentation on the inspiring women of Kashmir. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar. Thank you. It was pleasure listening to Miss Gopika Devarajan, her melodious music. I have grown up listening to the folk narratives about some extraordinary women of Kashmir, and it will be worthwhile to share their inspiring stories today. When Mr. Shankar approached me for the first time about this lecture series, the first topic that came into my mind was to talk about these women about whom I have been hearing as a folk narrative. Though I'm not so much into history, but after hearing their stories, I myself felt quite inspired. I would like to first of all thank um, Madhyama Dharma Samajam and Kanchi Kamakoti Seva Foundation for having invited me here today. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be here talking to you all. I have prepared a small presentation which I'll be sharing with you. So this is going to be the agenda of my talk today. I'll begin with a general description of women in the society. I'll be talking about the status of women in Kashmir, the eminent women from Kashmir, and the contemporary women and the lessons that they can draw from the past. And towards the end, I'll talk about a recent book, The Chronicles of Kashmir. Yatra pujyante naraha ramante tatra devataha. Wherever women are regarded and respected, godly people reside there. And on the contrary, wherever women are not treated well or respected, any efforts that men put do not bear the fruits that they would expect. That's something which was told by Lord Manu many years back. Rigvedas also say, O scholarly woman, the way a river breaks away mightiest of the hills and rocks, the scholarly woman destroys myths and heights through her intellect alone. May we bow to women through our polite words and noble actions. So, if you see, our ancient scriptures have always spoken about women as a source of power, whether it is Lord Shiva's Parvati, who is also called Shakti, or it's the Lakshmi of Lord Vishnu. Woman is also addressed as Annapurna, which means someone who brings wealth and prosperity. We call our motherland, our nation, motherland, because a mother, a woman, is the source of life. She's the one who nurtures life. The status of women has undergone change over several years, with men as hunters and women as gatherers. The existence of a woman assumed a unique meaning. I would say the existence of both men and women assumed a certain meaning. And over a period of time, as the society became more materialistic and the economic viability of human beings took precedence over the intellectual, spiritual, or any other contribution of a human being, the women started being looked upon as a weaker sex. She was not expected to have her own aspirations other than looking after the home because she was not economically viable. But if you see, the act of looking after the household is also an economic activity. However, it's not something, it's an unpaid labor. So that's the change that society has undergone over a period of time. And if we look at the status of women in Kashmir, I would say that in the early 20th century, the women were not educated, they were married off early. Whereas, if you see the later part of the 20th century, uh, specifically the Kashmiri Pandit women, they started getting educated. They started going through not only the schools, but they also acquired higher education at the graduate or postgraduate level. They started moving out into the workforce. They started becoming teachers, government employees. During those days, there were very few private jobs. And there were also some women who broke the stereotype and stepped into the careers which were strictly prohibited for women. And those would be careers into acting, um, talking on the radio, or singing and dancing. So these were a clear no for women. But in the later part of the 20th century, women also started stepping into these careers. Now I'll talk about the ancient women, the folk narratives that I talked about. I would start with Mata Rapabhavani. She was the daughter of Madhav Judhar, who was a very spiritual man. Uh, he used to worship Mata Sharika. He used to visit Hari Parvat every day and meditate there for a very long time. One day, Mata Sharika gave him a boon and he asked her to be born in her family as his daughter. And the same happened. He had a daughter who was named Alaksheshwari. Alaksheshwari grew up as a normal girl under the tutelage of her own father. She used to come across many noble men who were educated intellectuals because they were her father's company. That's the environment in which she grew. But like any ordinary girl, she was married off at a very young age. However, after her marriage, her in laws could not understand her intellectual capacity. She was expected to be like any normal woman, even though she would fulfill all the responsibilities of a daughter-in-law. Still, the expectations of the society were not met because she had other aspirations as well. It is said that her mother-in-law did not treat her very well. There is a famous folk narrative which I have heard is that once her father sent a pot of kheer, the rice porridge, to her home. However, mother-in-law said that this is not sufficient to be distributed among the people. It's too less. She started cribbing about it. And Mata Rupabhavani told her to just not look inside the pot and keep serving the people. Her mother in law kept serving and she kept on serving, it never finished. And when she was finally tired, she brought back this pot to her. And when she looked into it, there were just 3 grains of rice in it. The in laws still did not understand that their daughter in law was very spiritual. So finally, she had to part ways with her husband. After that, she did not even go back to her father's house. She meditated for a very long time. She lived for almost 100 years. And as she meditated, she moved around various places in Kashmir and she started getting noticed as someone spiritual. And people started loving her, they started following her. One day, a blind boy came to her and told her that he could not see and if she could do something about it. She asked this boy to dig a well, and the water that came out of it, she asked him to wash his face with this water. When the boy washed the face, he started seeing all of a sudden. This is the picture of that well here, and on top is the house of Mata Ropa Bhavani in Safakadal, Srinagar. She started writing. Her writing was mystic, and some 145 of her works have been uh, gathered. Vak is similar to the lyrics in English. It comprises of 4 lines. It's a short poem with a theme. She was into mystical poetry, which was a blend of Shaiva, Vaishnava, and Sufi schools of thought. It was philosophical, and it dealt with the questions like the ultimate purpose of life, breaking free from the limitations of the body and merging with absolute truth. She also spoke about women. She also spoke about the divinity. She would um, inspire women to, her writings would inspire women to be more divine, to seek internal peace for the benefit of the society. She did not write about women empowerment, but she wrote more about the women enlightenment. Many of the women during those times were had some kind of a disdain for the patriarchy, but Mata Rapabhavani did not have that kind of an attitude, probably because her father had always been by her side. And talking about the other extraordinary woman, or let me just read out this verse first, Mata Rupa Bhavani's verse. It says, I did not come on this earth as a seed to fall in the circle of births. I'm not the elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. I'm beyond the primordial universal self and the individual self. I am the supreme consciousness. So you can figure out the nature of the writings of Mata Rupa Bhavani. Another extraordinary woman was Habba Khatun. Her name was Zoon originally. Zoon in Kashmiri means moon, and moon stands for beauty. She was extremely beautiful, and she was also called the Nightingale of Kashmir because she sang very well. Born in 1554 in a place called Pampor in Kashmir. She was born to a very ordinary peasant family and at a very young age married off to a peasant boy. But as she was again intellectually superior, her in laws could not understand her extraordinariness. And again, they always wanted her to be more acceptable and more ordinary, more accommodative, which finally did not happen. And again, it is said that her in laws were also not very good to her. Her poetry is also influenced by her uh, personal life. And finally, she also left her home and she started wandering. She used to write, she used to sing. And one day, Yusuf Shah Chak, who became the king of Kashmir, spotted her. He liked her. They fell in love and they got married. She had very pleasant 6 years with him when suddenly the Mughal king Akbar was extending his kingdom and now he wanted Kashmir. He sent for Yusuf Shah Chak for a friendly meeting. However, he imprisoned him. So the last time Habba Khatun saw her husband was when he left for Delhi to meet Akbar. And after that, Habba Khatun's situation was again the same as 6 years before. She started wandering in the valleys of Gurez, where she wrote and she sang. There is a mountain range in, I would say, a mountain peak, which is a part of the Himalayan range in the Gurez Valley of Kashmir, which is named after Habba Khatun in her memory. And here you see the picture of her house in Kashmir. She started wandering and she continued to write. Her poetry was full of hope. to find her love. She wrote of the miseries inflicted by her in laws, having led a very difficult life. She also talked about the perils of physical labor. Deeply steeped into romanticism, and his poetry was highly metaphorical and symbolic. Her verses talk of earthly love and are more pragmatic in nature. She spoke in the language of the common people about the issues that they could relate with. To know Habba Khatun is to know of an integral part of Kashmir, and more importantly, its literature. Lalleshwari, Laldyad as we call her, was another mystic poetess of Kashmir. She was born much before Habba Khatun and Mata Rupa Bhavani. And it's assumed that during those days, she was born in 1320, women were perhaps more educated because it reflects in her poetry. Her poetry was a blend of Shaivism and Vaishnavite philosophy, but she primarily brought to fore the Shaivism to the common man. She was again born in a very ordinary family, and she was married off at a very young age. And her story was also somewhat similar. She was ill treated by her in laws. It is said that she used to go to fill water to the nearby river, and she used to stay there for a long time because she used to meditate and pray Lord Shiva. However, her family used to be suspicious about her fidelity. And one day her husband came after her and he saw her on the bank of the river with the pitcher on her head, and he threw a stone on her pitcher. The pitcher broke, but the water in the pitcher stayed there, stagnated. And Laleshwari then picked up this water in her hands. She held it in her hands and she poured it into another container, and she kept on pouring it till it became a stream. And another story says that she was very much ill treated by her mother in law, that she did not even get sufficient to eat. A very common folk narrative says that her mother in law used to put a stone in the plate and then cover it with a very thin layer of rice, and it looked like a mound of rice, and that's what she had to eat. Finally, Laleshwari's family life also did not uh, really do very well, and she had to renounce the family. Laleshwari's poetry, she was the one who brought the Vaks into Kashmir, and Rapa Bhavani later on wrote the Vaks, but she was the one who brought them in. She carried forth the torch of Shaivism. Once esoteric, mysticism now became a part of the folk narrative. And she also warned against the superstitions, against the unwanted pomp and show. I'll read one of her verses. There is no light like the knowledge of ultimate truth, no pilgrimage like the one of the love of the Supreme, no relative like the Lord Himself. So we just heard the stories of women who had to really go extra far to the extent of leaving their families to be able to follow their own passions and their own aspirations. But in the later part, in the most recent history, we also have some women in Kashmir who have actually broken the stereotype, but without renouncing their families. We have some women like Bharti Zaru, who is an actor, Kailash Mehra, who is a singer, Brij Kishori, who is a radio artist, Raj Begum and Naseem Akhtar, who were singers. Prana Shonglu, who is an actor, and there are many more such names. And going back to the history, there were many more women like Arnimal, who was a poet, Kota Rani, the Queen of Kashmir, and Queen Didda. So there are ample of stories, you have about the women of Kashmir. Now, the contemporary women in the present day face different kinds of problems. The stories that we spoke of right now go back into the past when the social conditions were different and women had to really struggle to to be able to achieve what they aspired for. So the times have certainly changed. However, even in the contemporary world, also there are many parts of this world where the position of women is not that great. But even if we talk about the urban societies, we still see some discrimination out there. I would talk about the educated women who are working. We still see a lot of disparity in terms of the opportunities available and also the income disparity. We see women um, juggling between their work and career, with the joint families giving way to the nuclear families and childcare not being the responsibility of the enterprise. Women have a whole set of new issues. But if we compare this with the women I spoke of, the struggles, I would really not draw a comparison, but I would say that the stories are inspiring and they tell us that if you really want to achieve something in life, there is there is no dearth of what you are capable of doing. But luckily, we live in a time where we have the examples of the women like Kailash Mehra, like Prana Shanglu, who have been able to maintain the balance between their family and the work. And I think that's the road to future. That was about the inspiring women of Kashmir. And I would take few minutes to talk about this new book, The Chronicles of Kashmir, which is actually going to be formally released tomorrow, and it will be Facebook Live on the Facebook page Amarnath Vaishnavi Center of Excellence. This is a biography. It's of Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi, who was a social activist who worked for 7 decades, starting 19. He was born in 1925, and he passed away in the year 2012, and his work life begins formally from the year 1945. And he worked with the people on the ground, understanding their problems, and he was also equally connected with the people who were in the position of power. Therefore, he was a conduit between the common man and the people in power, whom he from time to time used to communicate the difficulties that people were facing. And his efforts also led to some of the historic changes and events that will be always remembered in the history of Kashmir, especially the Kashmiri Pandits. So, this book basically is a chronology of events of his own life, which were intertwined with various historic events in Kashmir. And this book also highlights some of the reasons which could have led to the Kashmir conflict. So that's all from my side. So over to you, Mr. Shankar.
Okay. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, Rohini. And thanks for again introducing this inspiring women. Although we talked so much about the past history, you are really picked the right people and introduced us. Now, as I always feel that our slots are not enough for the speakers. I've seen in your book, you talked about the status of the Pandit's current day status. Maybe we should reschedule one program talking
Yes,
about the current status, what aspirations you have, and how we are going to implement. Uh, there's a big gathering of diaspora of Kashmiri overseas, and they will all be willing or looking eagerly at our program and what we are going to talk about the future. What are your thoughts on this?
absolutely. I think I have this book with me here, The Chronicles of Kashmir, and it will be a pleasure to talk about this in a separate session. Maybe we could invite the author himself to talk about the book. And it will indeed be a good thing if you involve the youth in this program, and draw a comparison between the past and now. Past meaning the Kashmiri Pandits have undergone a lot of, I would say, cultural change, social change because of their exodus from Kashmir. So it will be great to also invite youngsters here on this platform who are born in the late 80s or in the early 90s, and have two speakers simultaneously, one from the past and one from the present, which will also, throw some light on what kind of a change the society has undergone on account of their exodus from Kashmir.
It's also likely that some of these youngsters who could appear in our program wouldn't have seen Kashmir, right? They wouldn't have been there or born there, or
See,
they
some
have
of
a
them
earning.
who are born after 90s, they could have gone as tourists, but they would definitely have heard the stories from their parents, and they would know what their previous generations have gone through, and imprints can definitely be seen in them. So it'll be
Do these
interesting to know.
students
Yeah.
go back to Kashmir even though they were not born there? Do they go back and they study? I know it's like some time ago, it's like a foreign country to most of them, like people, overseas Indians coming to India for studying. They living in India. Do they feel like going back and living there as a student? I don't know. The situation is changing now.
Well, I would say that they wouldn't like to go back there and study there. They would prefer to study in other parts of the India rather than going to Kashmir to study. But yes, people do visit there as tourists to at least see how uh, the place where their forefathers belonged to was like. But going for studies is like, being there for a long time, which I'm not sure that they would really feel safe over there. I have myself not been there for last 32 years, ever since we left in 1990.
Now, as you are aware, most of the children, NRI families, not everyone speaks a local language or the mother tongue. Everything is switched over to the local, whether in Europe or in the US. How does it work with the Kashmiris in exile? In exile, I mean in India, moved to other parts. Do they speak Kashmiri, or they maintain the culture? Because it's important, as you see from our leaflet. Uh, it's very important that this program is to create that awareness so that they could return to Kashmir one day without fear and with protection, which I think it's a great change that happened recently, and more opportunities are forthcoming. How this is going to be made use of?
Talking about the language, yes, there is always a casualty when a mass exodus of this kind happens. So, language takes the first stall. So, I wouldn't say that the younger generations have actually retained that part completely. So, you will see families where the youngsters speak Kashmiri, but the what you say, the tone and the way they speak, the pronunciation would be very different from the original Kashmiri. And you'll also see some people who understand, but they are not able to express themselves so well. And there would be few others who are not able to speak. So you'll see all kinds of people. It all depends on how we are retaining our language within the family. So you'll see all kind of people. Uh, Talking about the opportunities, I am not really sure because the change, the Article 370 was recently abrogated. I would still call it recent, even if it's 2 years back, because something that has happened, something like uprooting of a community, and 32 years have passed, people have not gone back there. So 2 years looks very recent because such kind of changes take too long to mature. So it will be right now too premature to say that whether it's an opportunity or not.
Now, I know that you are running an institution, RV Academy.
Yes.
You're focusing more on the downtrodden and skill development. You you have any such plans to start, which could be a great opportunity? Starting one in Kashmir and should be easier for you then.
Yes, I would love to do that. RV Learning Foundation is working towards the employability of the youth. We make them more well versed with what they can expect in the job market. And Kashmir definitely is a place where there is a lot of opportunity. And I do really hope that the situation there is conducive for setting up a center there so that we could actually streamline and channelize the energy of the youth out there into more meaningful uh, things, more meaningful activities. We also run activities in the area of women empowerment, women entrepreneurship, where we upskill the women, we counsel them, we teach them the new age skills, and so that they can start their own business or they can upscale their own businesses. So there is ample opportunity out there for growth, and definitely I would love to work in my own motherland. Why not?
As we all know, today is our 22nd weekly session, and we know that this program is watched by some important people abroad or in India. If you are to send a message to someone concerned, what would you ask them?
That's all right. If I have to send one message to everyone, um,
To someone who will be in a position to implement what you want to implement there.
well, I would say, in fact, I would have something to say to the youngsters. I would say to the youngsters that if you want to see, the very common saying, be the change that you want to see. If you want to see things change, I would really want them to join Indian administrative services, especially the Kashmiri youth. If they want to see change, they should be there themselves in the position of power, because now is their time. Now is the time when they can do something. They are the future. That would be my message.
That's very interesting. That's what everyone talks about these days, even in other parts of India, at administrative services. Now, moving to the pilgrim map of India, we have heard enough about all this, how Kashmir used to occupy a prominent place in our pilgrimage, right from Rameshwaram, now Varanasi, which we all witnessed recently.
Yes.
And Kashmir, I think left out or got cut off maybe in 1,000 years. That could be one opportunity for people longing to visit Kashmir. Now that we keep hearing about Kashmir and maybe that got cut off, that could be one area which could be developed so that we feel that integration of pilgrim centers in India, which a lot of people are very religious and all Hindus would like to make use of that. We don't know if anything is going to be done on that part, which should have existed long ago in Kashmir. Do you have any say on that?
Well, I would say that Kashmir has been on the pilgrimage map. The annual Amarnath Yatra that we have is known all over India. And we have some other places like Vaishno Devi, which is visited by pilgrims from all over India. So I think it is still there on the map. However, there is a scope for developing it further because there are many more places which are not so much on the entire India's map of pilgrimages, such as Mata Kheer Bhavani or Hari Parvat or even Shankaracharya temple for that matter. And there are many more temples in India, in Kashmir, which have actually faced the terrorism, and it will be really good if those places are again renovated. And Kashmir, anyway, is famous for its tourism because of its landscape and beauty. And religious tourism is also definitely something which can be looked at.
Yeah, one of the speakers who appeared in our program talked about preserving those uh, temples in ruins. Maybe that could be made as a museum, or I don't know if it could be rebuilt, all those temples. They're all almost
Yes,
finished. So
yes.
there are so many temples that you see in Kashmir that people are not aware of. After seeing this program, one would even compare that with places like Kanchipuram, which has got so many temples. Similar temples are in existence. Only when you come to south and see our temples, uh, which couldn't be destroyed, uh, you feel how magnificent these temples should have been in Kashmir. So maybe that area, I think, can be given some importance and
It
promoted.
should be important because the temples in Kashmir have suffered a lot on account of terrorism, and even before that, even before 1990, I wouldn't really have the figures for how many and all because I'm not really an expert into that area. But yes, there are huge number of temples which have been destroyed in the meanwhile, and there is a large scope for the renovation. Indeed.
Yeah, one speaker even mentioned about how they used to have a department for temple destruction. And can imagine how much time they must have spent and still they couldn't finish the job. So there are very interesting facts about Kashmir that we keep hearing. And thank you once again for taking time to come forward and making your presentation. And we would like you to come back again with your new insights that you mentioned about in the book. And
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here and great honor to be speaking to you and the audience on this platform. Thank you
okay,
once again for the invite.
many thanks. Talk to you soon. Okay, we thank you again for our 22nd program. Especially, we thank Kamkodi.tv and VDSP for streaming this. As always, we will meet on Saturdays, 7 p.m. And we have more programs lined up for coming months. And always join us on Saturday, 7 p.m. Until then, goodbye to you and thank you.